On the morning of December 7th, 1941, the peaceful waters of Pearl Harbor reflected the warm Hawaiian sunrise. Palm trees swayed gently in the tropical breeze, and sailors aboard American warships were beginning what they expected to be another ordinary Sunday. Some were eating breakfast. Some were writing letters home. Others were preparing for church services. No one imagined that within minutes, history would change forever. The attack that was about to unfold would not only devastate the United States Pacific Fleet, but would also transform the course of World War II, alter global politics, and reshape the 20th century. For generations afterward, people would remember these events simply as a date which will live in infamy. But to truly understand Pearl Harbor, we must travel back years before the explosions. The attack did not happen suddenly. It was the result of decades of political tension, economic rivalry, military ambition, and strategic miscalculations that slowly pushed two powerful nations toward an unavoidable collision. By the early 20th century, the world was changing rapidly. Powerful nations competed for colonies, natural resources, and military dominance. Empires rose, empires fell. Industrial production transformed economies. Modern warships replaced wooden fleets. Aircraft revolutionized military strategy. New technologies connected continents while simultaneously making wars more destructive than ever. Among these rising powers was Japan. Once an isolated island nation, Japan had transformed itself during the late 19th century into one of Asia's strongest military and industrial powers. Factories expanded, shipyards produced powerful warships, modern armies replaced traditional samurai forces. Within only a few decades, Japan had become one of the world's fastest-growing empires. Victories against China and Russia shocked much of the international community. For the first time in modern history, an Asian nation had defeated a major European power. Japan's confidence grew dramatically. Military leaders believed their country's destiny was to dominate East Asia. Across the Pacific Ocean, another nation was also rising. The United States had emerged as an economic giant. Its factories produced enormous quantities of steel, automobiles, oil, and machinery. Its navy expanded rapidly. American influence stretched across both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Hawaii, located in the center of the Pacific, became one of America's most valuable strategic locations. Following its annexation in 1898, the islands became home to an increasingly important naval base. Pearl Harbor offered deep natural waters capable of supporting large fleets. Military planners believed it would serve as America's shield in the Pacific. Few imagined it would someday become one of its greatest vulnerabilities. During the 1920s and 1930s, tensions throughout Asia steadily increased. Japan expanded into Manchuria. Later, it launched a full-scale invasion of China. Entire cities were devastated. Millions of civilians suffered unimaginable hardship. Reports of massacres and wartime atrocities shocked much of the international community. The United States watched these developments with growing concern. American leaders believed Japan's aggressive expansion threatened both regional stability and American interests throughout Asia. As Japan occupied more territory, it required increasing amounts of oil, steel, rubber, and other raw materials. Yet Japan possessed relatively few natural resources of its own. Its growing empire depended heavily on imported supplies. Many of those critical resources came from the United States. This created a dangerous paradox. Japan's military expansion relied upon materials supplied by the very nation becoming increasingly opposed to its actions. American policymakers hoped economic pressure could force Japan to change course. Instead of immediate military confrontation, they imposed restrictions on exports. Eventually, oil shipments, the lifeblood of Japan's navy, air force, and industry, were dramatically reduced. For Japanese military leaders, this represented a crisis unlike any they had faced before. Without sufficient oil, their empire would slowly grind to a halt. Warships would remain in harbor, aircraft would stay grounded, factories would cease production. Military planners estimated existing reserves might last only a limited time. The clock was ticking. Faced with this dilemma, Japan confronted an impossible choice: withdraw from conquered territories and abandon years of military expansion, or seize the natural resources of Southeast Asia by force. Yet there was one enormous obstacle: the United States Pacific Fleet. Stationed at Pearl Harbor, American battleships represented a powerful deterrent against Japanese expansion. If Japan moved south toward the oil-rich Dutch East Indies, British Malaya, or the Philippines, the American fleet could intervene. Japanese strategists concluded that any southern advance required first neutralizing America's naval power. Their solution was bold, dangerous, and unprecedented. Instead of waiting for war to unfold gradually, they proposed launching a surprise attack across thousands of miles of open ocean, an attack so devastating that the United States would be unable to respond for months. The architect of this daring plan was Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. Ironically, Yamamoto understood America perhaps better than many American leaders themselves. He had studied in the United States. He admired America's industrial capacity. He knew that if war became prolonged, Japan's chances of ultimate victory were slim. Yet, he believed that one massive surprise attack might cripple American morale and force negotiations before America's immense manufacturing power could be fully mobilized. It was an extraordinary gamble. The Japanese Navy began preparing in absolute secrecy. Pilots trained relentlessly. Aircraft carriers assembled. New torpedoes were specially modified for Pearl Harbor's shallow waters. Detailed intelligence was gathered regarding ship locations, airfields, and defensive positions. Every aspect of the operation demanded precision. Failure could mean disaster. Success could change the balance of power throughout the Pacific. Meanwhile, life at Pearl Harbor continued almost normally. American servicemen carried out routine exercises, families attended social events, bands performed concerts, ships entered and departed the harbor. Although diplomatic negotiations between Washington and Japan had grown increasingly tense, few expected an immediate attack. Many military planners believed if Japan struck, it would target the Philippines, Malaya, or perhaps Singapore. Hawaii seemed too distant, too heavily defended, too unlikely. This assumption would prove catastrophically wrong. As November 1941 drew to a close, 6 Japanese aircraft carriers quietly departed northern Japan. Their destination remained known only to a select few. Radio silence was strictly enforced. The fleet crossed the vast North Pacific under terrible weather conditions, avoiding normal shipping routes to remain completely undetected. Thousands of sailors and pilots understood they were participating in one of the most consequential military operations in history. Ahead of them lay Pearl Harbor. Behind them lay peace. The world stood unknowingly on the edge of one of history's most significant turning points. Within days, the first bombs would fall, the Pacific would erupt into war, and nothing would ever be the same again.